Hello, friends. On today's episode of Welcome to the Winner Circle, alongside co-host Bianca Leger, we interview a registered psychotherapist, certified yoga teacher, and founder of the Feelosophy. She specializes in mindfulness, compassion, and somatics. Welcome to the Winner Circle, Ashley Brodeur.
Thank you. It's so good to see you again, and to see you, Bianca, and to have to gather in this way in this day and age. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and the goal of these conversations, Ashley, is to really uplift, inspire, and empower our listeners on their hero's journey. And it's a very positive conversation that we intend to having here. And it starts with a really positive question, and that is, what do you love about your world right now, Ashley?
Ooh. First of all, I love that you are asking me the questions, because I spend my whole day asking really wonderful, beautiful questions. So what do I love about my world right now? I love that I get to view parts of people that maybe don't often get to be seen. I often think that the work that I get to do in therapy is people show me parts of themselves that are often hidden in our day-to-day world. And so why that can be both beautiful and overwhelming, but most times it's a very beautiful space to hold people, to show parts of themselves that they've been scared to show, or worried to show, or they judge those parts of themselves. So I think that's what I love about my world right now.
Yeah, that's really special. It's you wouldn't do that with anybody. So it must feel really purposeful to be able to play that role for people, to give them permission to express.
Yeah.
So you and I, Ashley, we met at the Prairie Love Yoga Festival, where you've taught many times, and I've taught there myself. And since we first met, you've evolved personally and professionally. I talked a bit about where you've evolved into in my bio, but can you just kind of yourself let us know what are you up to these days? What are your primary projects and passions that you're working on?
Yeah. So we met when I was full-time yoga instructor. I used to really specialize in restorative yoga with a hands-on touch component. I continue to be really passionate about the role of touch, and the role that it can play in regulating ourselves, co-regulating with one another. I like to use the word healing, but I think touch is just such an important aspect of our life. And so while I no longer offer that the way I used to, because touching strangers during COVID, I'm sure we just can't do it. I almost laugh at how that used to be what I would do, is hundreds of people being touched by complete strangers, and how beautiful that was, and now how scary I think the narrative is around that. But I still incorporate the role of touch, and how it can play a role in regulating our nervous systems, how we can incorporate self-touch, how we can advocate for touch in a partnership and a friendship. So while I'm not the one touching people anymore, literally with my hands, it still plays a big role in the type of work that I do in my therapy practice.
Do you think that people benefit the same way from self-touch as they do from touch from other people and stranger? Because it feels like there's a different kind of surrender or permission that we give when we allow somebody else to touch us.
Totally.
Do you think people benefit the same way?
I think it's different. And I also think touch is so layered, and in the sense that when we introduce touch from another person, based on who that person is to us, if we think that they're safe, if we've given consent based on our own histories, our own trauma, touch from another person is just so much more layered and complex. If we are able to get it from someone who we've consented to, and it feels safe and supportive, and we're in conversation with them as we're getting touched, I think it's so profound. But I don't think many people have access to that. sometimes. So self-touch is something that we all can access.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think it's the same. But I think that it still has like beautiful like qualities to it.
Yeah, the accessibility, the fact that we can all learn it and then have access to that tool at any time, that I see a lot of value in that.
Mhm.
Mm.
So one question we ask all our guests at the start of these conversations pertains to their mission. Companies, businesses, corporations all have missions, but Bianca and I truly believe that to optimize ourselves as human beings, we ought to be aware of our mission, our overarching mission that is in all that we do, whether that be professionally, personally, and everywhere in between. And missions can always be changing, but it serves as our North Star. It's something we should be aware of right here, right now. Ashley, what is your current mission here in this reality plane?
The thing that came to me right away is just like to provide a space to feel. So whatever that looks like. So that's just how I try to show up, is like just that space. Whether it used to be like the yoga class was my space, but now it's like virtual therapy is just a space that like you can feel, you can identify your feelings, we can validate them, we can accept them, we can offer them a lot of compassion. But I think like a space to feel, but also like feel in general. Like I think it's so easy to numb, especially the world is like super heavy and dark. And so it makes a lot of sense that we want to turn in and like numb, distract, avoid. So for me, like a space to feel is also to go, like, it's also okay to feel the darkness and the heaviness and also feel the joy, and like both can exist at the same time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. I have a question for you about that.
Yeah.
So I heard on one of your podcasts, I knew a little bit about you.
Yeah.
You were sharing how just the lockdowns and being with ourselves, it really forced us to sit with everything that we feel. And it's something that I had to practice as well, because I was kind of disconnected from my feelings and my bodily sensations, and really learning to be in tune with emotion and feeling emotion in the physical. Do you think that space holders create a disconnect more easily from their feelings? because we learn to hold space for others. That means that we put aside what we feel, because the focus is on the honoring of what it is that we are containing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there's some sort of dissociation that happens a little more easily for the people who tend to hold space?
I think well, okay, that's a wonderful question. I think for myself, I've learned, and actually part of my training was to like intentionally dissociate, because in order to hold compassion, I need to be really attuned to like your pain and your suffering, and not my experience of your pain and your suffering. Because if I'm more attuned to my experience of your pain and your suffering, I'm going to take away from you.
Yeah.
That's not to say that I'm not allowed to feel. It's just that there's this like, part of my training with one of my mentors is like, we have to learn how to like intentionally dissociate and be okay with discomfort. So I do think that some space holders, like if they're holding a lot of space all the time, I would imagine that over time, in order to sustain that work, they might have to dissociate. But I imagine, or I would hope that it's intentional. Like we know that's what we're doing.
I see.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just need
And
to
I
be
know, because I know some people like highly sensitive, or people who identify as empaths, often like feel the pain, and then they will often report that they more quickly will feel like burnout or compassion fatigue, because when they are no longer holding space, or they close a session, or they walk away from an interaction with a friend, they're like, ooh, it's still like in them and with them.
Well, that's a good way to be aware of it.
Yeah.
To know that, like, if you're drained, then maybe maybe you do need to clear yourself.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
So we're talking about feelings and we're talking about missions, and that makes me want to ask this next question. My current mission here in my reality, in which I embed, is to feel good and to walk others home in this process. Home being that place of wholeness, love, patience, peace, security, acceptance, and whatever that means to you. And that focus on feeling good is inspired by one of my mentors and someone who I really look up to, and that's Esther Hicks and Abraham. And she talks about, and it's something that I fully believe and have been through during these last 2 years of inner reflection, during this time of somewhat isolation. There's always positives, there's always negative, there's always dark, and there's always light in every situation. And it's which frequency, which vibration do you choose to attend to? In this moment, I could choose to see the negatives because they're there. They're always there. It's the dualistic space. But the positives are also there. And my priority is to see that dark, to see that negative, to see and just to let it pass, because that's not serving me. And the more I spend my energy on that, you bring more of that in. So very curious to hear your thoughts on that mission of feeling good. And what's your thoughts on that? Yeah, because you talked about how there's positives, there's negatives, and I choose to. I've examined my darkness. I've looked at it. I've accepted it, but I try not to intentionally focus time and space on there when not necessary.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. So yes, and I think that's beautiful, and I think we need both light and dark. I think in a lot of work that I do and a lot of like witnessing that I do, sometimes though it's circumstances, environments, like systems make it really hard to just focus on the positive. Like for a lot of people, there are like systemic barriers that we have to name, that it's not just toxic positivity, which I'm not saying that's what you're describing, but sometimes people will often think like, oh, if I'm just positive, I'll feel better. But sometimes we have to remember that it's not like a mindset always that can, it's not always like people's misfortune is not always because of their mindset. And I think that can sometimes be a disservice. There's a lot of like systemic barriers and systems in place that keep people down, and it's not just their mindset. So that's just kind of like my little take on that. But I do believe that I think if you have the ability and the capacity to see and to like acknowledge that there is darkness, and to not label and judge that, and to accept that it's there, but there's also like this other side. So yeah, I work a little bit more with like acceptance of like all that is, I guess. So that's like, yeah. And I guess my belief too, if I get like a little nerdy with the role of the nervous system, is often when we are having like a stress response or we're having a traumatic response to something, the part of our brain that has the ability to have like foresight or the ability to have that perception, it gets turned off. So all we're in is this like fight, flight, freeze, survival response. So a lot of people are operating in what some people call like we're in hyperarousal or hypoarousal. And when we're in those states from like a nervous system state, it's actually really hard to access like those positive thoughts. It's not that they're not there, it's just really hard to access.
Well, I for sure agree. And one thing that I've been working on for the last decade consciously is to learn how to control my nervous system, override it. And we can override our nervous system with breath, with posture, with our vibrational intention and being present. And I think it's a place where we could get where feeling good is not a mindset. It's a being. It's an embodiment. So yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And Bianca, I would really love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Well, I totally get the idea that we're definitely not getting in tune with the creativity when we're in a stress response. So there's a lot of value in learning how to regulate our nervous system. I think this seems like one of the most essential things we can do right now, because yes, we do need to get comfortable with feeling all things, because it's all part of the human experience. And I think that the acceptance of every range of emotion is really key here. We're not really talking about the value of the darkness and what we label as more of a positive emotion. And we really tend to categorize our emotion in good and bad, when ultimately all emotion hold messages for us. So I think this all goes in pair, that we need to feel everything. We need to cultivate that acceptance for everything that we feel, because it is part of being human. And also we can learn as we're evolving to learn the strategies and use the tools that you're probably sharing with the people you work with to understand our experience and regulate the physical body through which we filter everything, so that we're still accessing the realms of possibilities that we're shutting down when we're in a stress response.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Bianca. So back to feeling, Ashley, one of the ways you got into touch with your feelings is through yoga practice. So let's talk about that, the origin story of you becoming an expert, and there's air quotations there, in feeling, and how is involved to you in being a psychotherapist. So the origin story of this journey.
Yeah, I guess origin story, it was I'm like, where do I start with my origin story? I mean, I'll start just when I started teaching yoga when I was like 19. I was just drawn towards it while I was in university. When I left university, I started teaching a little bit more full time. I got introduced to like Ali Maz, which I'm sure like taught at some yoga festivals as well with her. And I started assisting her like passion project Girl Vana Yoga. And I started yoga was like my full-time. It was a job at the time, definitely a passion, but it was definitely like a job. And I'm okay with saying that actually now, where I am with my yoga journey, to be honest, is that it was like a job for me. But what started as a job led to this, like one day, I don't even know, like, I don't know if it was like an aha moment, if it was a download, some people call it. It just was this idea, like, what would happen if I just did a whole yoga class where I could touch people? Because I would often do like, in a lot of our yoga teacher trainings back then, we would learn some hands-on assist, not a lot. And we would always learn like the Shavasana, like neck pull. That was it. So I often did that. And I thought, what would happen if I could have a full class where I could incorporate touch, but not from a place of I want to like correct you or fix you, because I have no say of like what you should or should not be doing with your body, I felt, but I wanted to do it from a place of like support. And so I hosted a workshop, and that night, one of the participants emailed me, and she was a mom, and she had just shared like she couldn't remember the last time that like she was touched just for herself. She felt that she was sometimes like overtouched by her kids. And so it was just, she was so thankful that there was a space to receive supportive touch. And I just continued based off that story. And the more that I did it, the more people would come up to me afterwards, and they would start to share their own experience with touch. I've done a lot of work with like people who have gone through sexual assault, myself included, where we needed to establish and like rewrite our narrative around like what supportive touch would look like. I would do a lot of touch for people. We'd call it like skin hunger, where that's this feeling that you get in your body when you're not touched enough. And so what started as like, again, I'll be honest, what started was like, this is my job and I want to like I have this idea for a workshop, really turned into something like bigger. And the more people were sharing their stories with me, the more I realized like I didn't have the training to hold that space for them. So that's what inspired me to like go back to school to get my master's and to do counseling psychology. I just didn't feel like it was safe for me being in the role as yoga teacher to offer what I think a lot of these people were coming to me for. I could listen, I could definitely listen, but a lot of what people were sharing with me just felt like way bigger than where I was at. And so I knew that I probably wanted to go back to school and learn.
And through that process, how did fear arise? What was your relationship with fear when you first decided to become a yoga teacher, a full-time yoga teacher? That's not easy. So fear undoubtedly would have arisen. And then transitioning into like education to become a psychotherapist and becoming one, where did fear show up along that path? And how did you deal with it? How did you use it as an ally?
Fear of like imposter syndrome. Like I was 19 when I started teaching yoga. So now I think that was more common. Like 12, 13 years ago, I was like a little baby. And I think fear of like, who am I to teach this? Often, I think I've gotten a lot better at that narrative that I hold now, but that core belief of like, who am I to be talking about this? I had a professor who he said, like, often as therapists or as people, our greatest fear is to be found out. And so just like he said it in like a really cool way that I can't remember, but he was pretty much saying like, our greatest fear is to be found out. So just like call yourself out, like, don't pretend to be an expert. Like, you don't have to be. I often will say with my clients, I'll be like, I could be wrong, but this is what I'm hearing. I could be wrong, because I'm not saying like, I know all the answers. I'm sure there's things even that I'll try to describe what I know about the nervous system or about therapy or about touch or about yoga, and I might be wrong, and that's okay. Like, I'm human, I make mistakes, I learn. So yeah, fear was always like, I'll be wrong, I'll be found out, like, who am I to be doing this? I work through that being like, it's okay if I'm wrong. It's okay if I get found out. I'm messy and I can make mistakes, and that's kind of cool.
I love that reminder. To me, what I hear in this is also a reminder that when we feel that imposter syndrome, is that we're kind of trying to build an identity that doesn't feel like it fits yet, or we think that we should be something, and it feels really good, and like it takes off the pressure to be like, wait, I can come up as I am. I'm playing a role, I'm learning my way through, but I don't need to be something that I'm not, or I don't need to play a role or an act. I really like that authenticity. I think that's really appealing also. It probably really creates that safe space for all the people you interact with, because you're showing up as yourself, and that's powerful.
Thank you.
So fear showed up for you as a 19-year-old when you first began your yoga career. How about when you decided to transition from a stable life, a stable reality, a stable knowing of being a yoga teacher, being a teacher for this brand, Guravana, with Ali Maz, running workshops, successful workshops, and embarking upon a new path? Did fear present itself there?
Teaching yoga never felt stable for me, but that's fine. Like, I was like, oh God, I think I feel more stable now. But it's just the industry of yoga that I could go on. That's a different conversation. But there was fear, like, in that moment that I decided to go back to school, I also made the choice to move from Vancouver to Toronto. So there was just a lot of fear again of like, what are you doing? Do you know what you're doing? Like, it was a lot of trust. I made the choice to move to Toronto and to go back to school. Again, just like walking through downtown Toronto, I was listening to a podcast, I was visiting for work, and I just had this thought that was like, you should move here. And I just was like, okay. And I did. It was the weirdest, like, still to this day, I like did not research it. I did not plan anything. I packed up my, like, you know, I had like a beautiful little apartment that overlooked the ocean in Vancouver, in Deep Cove, if you've ever been. And I decided to like move to Toronto, and my view went from like being the ocean to being like inside somebody else's apartment in a cement wall. Like, I still, I'm shocked that that was something I did. But so yeah, fear a lot was like, what are you doing? You did not plan this out. You did not research this. But like, go for it. I don't know.
This is so funny because I kind of did a similar move and with Toronto as well, because I lived in Toronto and it was this quick visit and I found myself there. And I think that the way I resonate with this is that our minds, they're so judgmental, right? Like, what are you doing? You're crazy. Like, this makes no sense. But there's like something here that's guiding us. And it's the making the heart and the mind work together that's so funny at times. And so when you share the doubt, I feel like it's that play. It's like mind and heart being like, mind is like, what are you doing? And heart's like, no, we head there. That's where we're going.
Totally. Fear of judgment, I guess, Bianca, just like you summed that up really nice. I think it was the fear of judgment of like, what will people think of this? Because I built this life, I have this life, and I wasn't completely throwing it away by any means, but it wasn't really linear. It was just kind of like, here you go. Try this.
Big shift.
Yeah.
So from these lived experiences with fear in your personal life, how do you use those experiences to advise your clients? Because undoubtedly clients come with you with various fears, whether that be fear of ending a relationship, starting a relationship, moving cities, quitting a job, pursuing a path to become a yoga teacher, a psychotherapist, or whatever their heart is calling them to do. So when your clients come up to that wall of fear, that crossroads of I should do this versus the must that they feel in the heart, what do you say? How do you help and advise those upon who you work?
Sometimes we'll do a lot of trying to distinguish between if it's like fear and discomfort, if it's like a threat or discomfort, because sometimes the brain can code both, right? So like something that I feel is going to provide me with discomfort, my brain might code it as like a real threat, which then will turn on everything that I might do to protect myself. So that could be not doing it. That could be like overanalyzing, overthinking, needing outside perspective. So sometimes we'll just first try to distinguish, like, is this a threat, like a real threat, a real fear? Or is this just something that is bringing up some discomfort for you? And discomfort is something that sometimes even just that language sometimes can be a nice shift for people, that they go, oh yeah, discomfort, like I can get through that. Like that just feels more like we can contain discomfort, we can move through discomfort, we can choose discomfort. So I don't know, when I hear that, I guess the main thing is sometimes we'll shift that language. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So along your journey, you've met many different mentors and helpers along the way. And I'd like you to take a moment to acknowledge some of these special people who've influenced you, and who were they? And what were your key takeaways that you've learned from them that you've incorporated into your being?
Ooh, definitely like Ali Maz comes to mind. She was probably the first person who represented a yoga teacher at that time who was like authentically themselves. And I think that was the thing that I needed to hear the most then. And it's the thing that I still need to hear the most. That is like, the world needs you to be exactly who you are, and just honest about that. Like, so that was the main takeaway that I got from her, which was like, you don't have to perform, you don't have to pretend you're a certain way, you get to be exactly who you are, and that is always enough, and people will gravitate towards that. And she always says, like, the false falls away. So that, she was a huge mentor of mine. She still is. And this professor, I guess Dr. Gelman, he just was like, I don't know, and I think he just represented this thing of like, exactly who you are is enough. He was this like old professor man. He's worked in the industry for years and years and years. And he just, every time he met with us, he just always was like, I could be wrong. I don't know. Like, tell me what you know, like, help me learn, help me keep growing. And that was really beautiful to see someone who's like, I don't know, 60, 70, just in obviously like an expert position and in a power position, being very much like, I still have a lot to learn. And then, I don't know, I think my mentors are just like, even a lot of my clients, like my family, my mom, my dad will always be mentors. I don't really view it as, yeah, this is bad. I wish I could name like cool people, but it's like my friends, you know, my clients who are going through so much, and then they still like wake up and show up. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That's what I hear. And all the people you mentioned, there's like an overlining thread of the people who are in tune with their hearts and kind of just value the showing up as you are, being authentic.
Yeah.
That's a huge reminder for all of us.
Yeah. Thank you.
So throughout this journey of highs and lows, you've met your lows. And listening to your podcast with Rochelle Taylor, the Curious Human podcast, you talked about one of those lows, and that was presented by the pandemic. So maybe we can start with that, about the challenges of the pandemic, the challenges you face, how you overcome them, and then maybe follow up that with the greatest challenge that you face and how you overcome that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the pandemic, I think for me, and something that I still think I struggle with, is that like, I too have my own like mental health challenges. I mean, Tuesday and Wednesday, like Tuesday, I didn't get out of bed till like 2, which was like right before I had to work. And Wednesday, I like had to cancel calls because I just couldn't find like the energy to do it. And then Friday, I'm here being like, hey, everybody, like, be yourself. And so I think sometimes my low points aren't necessarily my low points when I'm in like shutdown or I'm feeling depressive symptoms. My low points are when I judge myself for that. I think that's what I've identified. And I really do the work that's like, I think the low points are my judge myself for that, because I'm definitely someone who's like, I should know better. I know all these tools. I know all these techniques. I know like about, you know, going on like your, you know, stupid mental health walk for your stupid mental health. Like, I know that if I went for a walk or did the cold shower or like did those dishes or just like put my phone down, I would feel better. And I just can't right now. And so my low points are when I judge myself for that. So that happened a lot during the pandemic, especially I was living with my partner and his mom. And so there's a lot of like low points and trying to hide my low points, and judging myself for that. So how I got through that, I think, was like trying to judge myself less.
Yeah.
Still meeting that person and being like, you're still worthy of like love. Like you can still show up to this podcast, even though maybe like 2 days ago you weren't feeling your best. Like, you can still show up and talk about your own hero's journey, and like, you're not a fraud. Because I think before I would have probably like canceled, you know, like I would have said no or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I could resonate with that a lot, about judging yourself for low points. But one thing I realized, like, is what is a low point? Like, what is wrong with staying in bed till 2 p.m. like you said? If that's what your body needs, there's nothing. And then when you're feeling better, like today, you just get back on the bicycle, get back on that path, and walk strong. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that.
And also thank you for showing up regardless of the self-judgment, because it's so true. We judge ourselves so strongly, especially when we have high expectations on ourselves. And I can only imagine during that lockdown, with having other people's eyes on you on top of that, is like really amplifying the self-judgment. But self-compassion is such a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that judges herself, I don't even think that is us. Like that we is accumulation of what society told us we should do, or what we think our clients think we should do, or how others think we should be showing up. That judge, that's not us.
Totally. Yeah. I've been really like coming to terms with, like, it's not a fully thought out thought or idea, but what I've been witnessing a lot is that a lot of the pain that people go through is when they try to fit into what they've been taught or told is like normal. And a lot of the ways, at least my opinion, and I know like people can, debate this, but sometimes a lot of the things we're diagnosing is that, like, we diagnose because it's not normal. Like, you're neurodivergent, which means you're not neurotypical. So we're going to diagnose you. And a lot of, like, sometimes in the past, and it might still happen, is we try to give you like tools and techniques so that you can like fit into this like normal box. But instead, a lot of the work I do now is like, well, what do you need, like, for the world to meet you, not for you to like meet the world. Like, you don't need to, if you're like I work with a lot of people who have ADHD, and if you're neurodivergent, like, there's so much pain that can be caused by trying to fit into like what is being needed at school or at work. And a lot of the work we do is like, well, what could school like do for you, or what could work do for you, or what could your family do for you? My partner, a lot of like, I never therapize him because I think he would that would not be a good dynamic for us. But a lot of the work that we do together is like, instead of trying to get him to like fit into this idea that I've held, it's more like, how can I meet you where you're at, and like, what supports do you need? So yeah, it's just like a different thought that I have. Yeah.
So super important for your role as a psychotherapist, a partner, a daughter, a friend, is attending to your self-care, filling your cup first in order to serve others from your full self, your best self. What have been the foundational self-care tools that have been successful for you, that have worked for you?
Yeah. I read something once that said most of the self-care that we've been doing has been like aftercare. So it's like after the fact. So when I started reading that, I was like, very true. A lot of the self-care I do, which would be like planning days off, or taking a week off, or trying when I could to see family or vacation or whatever, booking a massage, sometimes actually felt like aftercare. So my self-care that has worked for me is like just a lot of like little tinier things. I call them, there's a book I read, it's called How to Do the Work. And she says, just start by making like one small promise to yourself a day. And so I started with like, every day before I have coffee, I will drink like a mason jar of water. And that was like, and once you start doing that enough, then you can incorporate something else. So I started like, so I drink my water every day. That worked out. I was really good with like movement, just like any type of movement. That has always seemed to be like really helpful for my self-care, like sleep. you know, most of these are really basic. They're nothing extravagant. Yeah, like that is it. And I some days still like need, some days I just need like one of them. Some days I need like all 10 of them. And that still doesn't work, but those would be, they're just like my small promises a day would be my self-care. Yeah.
I keep getting the image of a flower in a pot, and it really reminds me that it's kind of like that caring for something in order for it to bloom and blossom is really just tending to those needs. And even when you were talking about not needing to fit into the world, but serving us instead and having the world meet us, it was that same image of the flower and how we don't want to change the container, but more make sure that the soil is rich and so that we can blossom. Yeah.
I love that. I love that image. I love metaphors, so I'm gonna like keep that one in there. So thank you.
So rewinding back to something we talked about earlier, when you first started your yoga journey as a teacher at 19 years old, you were brought forth the question of who am I? Over a decade later, how would you answer that question? How have you learned the response to that? Who am I? Who are you actually, Brodeur?
I just always answer that question like I'm just like me, like full period, stop. I think for years, like that question, my mom used to always ask me that question when I was little. I think she saw it on Oprah or something, or Dr. Phil. Like I really do. And she would always sit me down like, who are you? And then I would say something and then she'd be like, no, but like, who are you? But why? And I think I got to a point one day and I was like, whoever I am, like, I'm not someone who has to justify who I am. Like, it was just a very big, like, who am I is just like me, full stop. So I never use language and words to answer that question because I just feel like I'm like me.
Yeah. And I feel that you share that answer with your being, with your frequency, your vibration. And thank you so much for showing up to this conversation. Through it all, what would you say? You've shared so much wisdom to us so far, but through it all, what would you say has been the greatest life lesson that you've learned on your path that you feel called to share to myself, Bianca, and our listeners right here now?
Greatest life lesson. Whew. Gosh, I don't know if I've learned it yet. Or I'm still learning it. I don't know. I think my greatest life lesson, I don't know why, like, just see people is coming up. And I don't even think this is making sense, even as I'm like saying it, but there's something about my greatest life lesson is like just see people and see humans and just full stop, like take away like the judgment of them and the labeling of them and the expectations of them and the comparisons of them, and just like just see them. I don't know. So I don't even really, I'll circle back if like something else comes from that. No, but when I close my eyes, it's just like, see,
beautiful. That's beautiful and profound in itself. Really.
That's perfect. So along the journey, you've learned a lot about love, undoubtedly. What does love to mean to you?
What does love mean to me? I don't think in the English language we have enough words for love. Me and my partner talk about this all the time. I wish we had more words. So sometimes I feel that love is like, as cheesy as it is, it's like such this feeling. It's like a knowing, it's a trusting, it's a seeing, it's a holding, it's a believing. I think you use the word frequency. I really believe like love definitely has like a frequency to it, but we don't have enough language for it. So it's just like a feeling. Yeah,
thank you. Well, I'm going to ask you the final two questions that we ask all two guests, and we're going to have to think of some words for this answer, for this next answer, because the question is, in 3 words, how would you describe the experience you're having on this earth? Um,
Oh my gosh. Ooh, how would I describe the feeling I'm having on this earth? It is what I'm just like coming with the words that are coming to my head right now. It's like catapulting. Don't know what that means for me, but it just means like my experience on this earth is just like, woo, like it's just, I'm going to give you sounds. I know I might be the first guest to give you sounds
Yes.
for this answer. My experience on this earth is like, woo. And then it's also like, and then it's also like, ah. As you want.
I love that.
Relief and bliss.
Ooh, I love that. What was the first? I heard relief and bliss. And then what was the first one?
Surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go.
But the sounds, it's perfect. I mean, words are so limiting at times, and yeah, so that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm the first guest
And
who's like sound.
yeah, for sure. 90 episodes. The first one to answer with sounds, and I think that answer was perfect. And we both understood exactly what you meant. We both felt it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The final question. We examined a lot of your past in this conversation. I'm going to use some magic now, and I'm going to transform us into the future. I'm going to bring us into the far future. And we're going to be alongside an 85-year-old Ashley Brodeur. Who is that 85-year-old Ashley? Where are you? Who are you surrounded by? What is the impact that you left here in your time in this reality?
85-year-old Ashley, she's really cute. She is like still those sounds. I just see her like she's like content, and she's like there, and she's grounded. And the image that came to me was mostly like nature and love, and whoever that shows up as is sure it could be my partner or family. Who knows? I'm not quite sure, but she's just there. I realize like I'm not actually very good with my words. Everything's like sound and movement, which makes a lot of sense for me. But yeah, she's just like, she's like an orb. She's like a being.
Mm-hmm. And the gift that you left with others in your time here, the legacy that you've left behind.
Yeah, like that permission to feel exactly how they need to. Yeah, without judgment, and a lot of acceptance, and maybe permission to be weird. Like I didn't really talk about that, but a lot of I sometimes think my mission is to be like a little bit weird for like in like how I show up in like certain roles, and just be like, oh, it's like you can be weird and silly and laugh. And yeah, I see 85-year-old Ashley being like kind of a weirdo, to be honest.
We need those.
So my last challenge for you, Ashley, is to really get in touch with your feelings and feel into that 85-year-old Ashley. Embody her in your present moment, in your being here, your being now. And I'm going to bring us back. I'm going to bring us back into this current moment, this infinite now. And that 85-year-old Ashley, she joins us and she whispers something in your ear. What does she tell you?
She said like acceptance. Yeah, that's what she said. What if she said like a really weird joke, you know? I wish she did. No. But like on this, which we didn't actually ever talk about, but this is just the thought that I was getting when I was saying, you know, my like, oh, I don't really have words and stuff. But don't you feel, and we're going to go over time and that's okay, but don't you feel sometimes that when you have those experiences, we were talking earlier about using different like drugs or psychedelics, like in all my experiences, I don't actually really ever have lots of words. I often have like movement and sound and feeling.
And knowings.
Right? So that was just me channeling that part of me.
Well, to more feeling, to more knowings, to more feeling for you ahead, for me ahead, for Bianca and everyone listening along. Bianca, any closing words on this conversation?
I think that everybody you're working with is extremely lucky to be in the space that you provide, because I can feel the love and the heart from here. And I think that we definitely need a lot more weirdness in this world. So that's amazing. Thank you. And thank you for showing up regardless of all the self-judgment, because our minds are so powerful and creative. So I'm grateful that we can override them with the love that we are.
Thank you so much, Bianca. Thank you.
And Ashley, I'll leave you for some closing thoughts that you'd like to offer, including where others could find and connect with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for just opening up this invitation. I'm just really grateful. I haven't seen you, Derek, in what feels like yesterday, but I know is years. I can still see you doing headstands in the front row of yoga. So it's actually something that even though, COVID, we've been so separated physically, it's moments like this where it is this reminder that even if we're not physically together, there's still this weird magic energy that still exists when you are present and showing up, even if it's virtual. Because I really felt that. It's been almost a minute since I felt that virtually. And I was oh yeah, no, it still is possible. So thank you for whatever magic and you guys are doing through this screen. It's it can be felt. Just so I hope you both know that.
Thank you.
And I'm really proud of what you're doing and creating, because it is felt. So if that sounds, woo, but
amazing. I resonate fully.
Yeah.
Which keeps me doing these podcasts and with no foreseeable end in sight.
Yeah.
And having these conversations.
Yeah.
Yes. And then they can find you at thephilosophy.com. That's where most people should direct you. You're also on social media, but just from listening to your podcast with Rochelle, send you a message, thephilosophy.com, and that's the best way to connect. Whether that be for a workshop, to get psychotherapy, to psychotherapy with you, or anywhere in between.
Yeah, I do. I predominantly focus on psychotherapy now, but always open to doing workshops, and maybe one day I'll return and teach a philosophy restorative yoga with hands-on touch again. Maybe.
Sounds divine. Well, if that happens, I hope to be there. To close every conversation, we bring our fists together in unity to the winner circle. Boom.
Boom.
Thank you so much, Bianca, Ashley. And that's a wrap on today's conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.